just going to click record, and we'll be recording for the remainder of the conversation. So a warm welcome to you. We're really happy to see you here, and thank you very much for joining us. We are the public affairs section of the U.S. Embassy, and a couple of my colleagues are on the line. I have muted everybody as the host. That's to prevent, the normal chaos that we've all been through with Zoom in the last year or so. Dogs barking, horns honking, things like that. While we love to hear from you, maybe we just want to focus on the issues at hand. So I'll mute everyone. If you have a question, there's two ways to go about it once I finish the presentation, and I'll outline the plan for our conversation here now. There's two ways to go about asking a question. One is the most immediate, to drop a question in the chat box, and my two colleagues will be monitoring that throughout the presentation, and I will pause briefly after the first presentation. Now, I mentioned we have two presentations today. We are going to go over a little bit about what public affairs is, what we can and cannot do, what differentiates us, and this is really important to get your head around. What differentiates us from USAID? We are not a development organization. If you take away one key thing, take that away. We are in the business of bringing people together around key policy issues and facilitating dialogue between Americans and South Africans. And while we value development, we understand its importance, and we collaborate with lots of development activities through the U.S. Embassy and through USAID. We do not do development, and it's really important to understand that from the beginning. The second presentation will be that we'll just kind of go through the NOFO. My colleague Maureen will join us for that. And then we'll pause and answer questions once again. So should take 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you all have. And with that, I'll get started. I should also mention that we are not going to provide specific coaching. So we'll answer questions in generalities. But from now on, now that the opportunity is open, what we do for one organization or potential applicant, we are required by law to do for all. So I cannot provide specific coaching about your individual proposal. We can talk in generalities. We can talk about sort of the key themes or things that are important to know, but I cannot provide specific coaching. And after this conversation, any questions must be submitted to the Pretoria grants@state.gov email. Maybe one of my colleagues can quickly drop that into the chat box, and those will be published as an FAQ prior to the close date of the award. This conversation will be recorded, as I noted, and posted on the website where you find the notice of funding opportunities. Just because, as I said, we want to make sure that everybody who's interested in applying has the benefit of understanding the answers that I've given or the presentations that I've given today. One important thing, noting that we are not development. Often, one of the ways that we can determine if a proposal is a good fit for the public affairs section is to consider the component of American content. American content can take many, many forms, and we are not going to begin to tell people how to do that. However, we want to make sure that you understand that there has to be some substantive American component to each successful proposal. Maybe you'll collaborate with an American university or an American NGO or an organization or a group of alumni from our exchange programs. Maybe you are an alumni from our exchange programs. There's many ways to embed American content. Sometimes people want to have an art or poetry contest, and they want to use a key piece of literature or a speech or something to frame that. If that's something from the United States of America, our history, our culture, our society, that counts as good American content. So American content and not development outcomes are two things that I really want you to have firmly in your mind after this conversation before you go to the trouble of putting together a full proposal. On that note, many of my colleagues and myself have worked for non-governmental and nonprofit organizations in the past, and we understand that time is money and the opportunity cost of putting together a comprehensive proposal for the US government. We know that those are real, and we want to thank you for considering working with us. And the main reason we want to do this is so that you don't waste your time putting together something when you really could be pursuing other opportunities. So with those things in mind, I'm going to do a quick screen share, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it is that we as public affairs can and cannot do. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So we're talking about federal awards. And when we talk about federal awards, can everybody see that screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can see something that says federal. Okay, good. Oh, I'm happy I did it right. What is a grant? We talk about grants in a very general sense, but a grant is it really sort of slang almost now to mean a federal award, federal being the US government, award being agreement to give you money or to give an organization money. It's a broad term. It can refer to a couple of instruments that we use to make awards. But we say grant, we really mean a couple of different things. And that is these three main instruments: a fixed amount award, a grant, or cooperative agreement. I won't go into the details of each of these. And we will post these slides. I believe we had agreed yesterday to earlier this week to post these slides on the website as well, so that you can kind of refer to them and make sure you're understanding what we cannot do. Also, what we cannot do is outlined in detail in the notice of funding opportunity. Most of the time, we will fall to a fixed amount award or cooperative agreement. And a fixed amount award, we're much less hands-on. We give a certain amount, we allocate a certain amount of money to a grantee, an awardee, and we say, go do the thing. Good luck, go do the thing. Give us a good, good social media piece, and we're happy. On the other hand, a cooperative agreement, we're very, very involved, and that might mean that we are helping you select applicants or participants. We're approving certain things. There's a lot more detail to it. In any case, all of these have to have a branding and marketing plan in which the U.S. government is given credit in all public and publicity items for the participation that we have. So most of the time in the grants officers here and the way we work, and especially if it's a first-time award, we're looking at a cooperative agreement. That means we will have substantive involvement and really be a partnership. I want to emphasize the word partnership. It's not that we're a landlord-tenant relationship or anything like that. It's not a contractual. It feels contractual, but it's distinct in the legal sense from a contract, in that it is a cooperative agreement. We collaborate, we work together, we cooperate to make something happen. Public diplomacy funding opportunities are distinct from every other U.S. government funding opportunity. They are announced on our website. The website is here. Perhaps one of my colleagues will drop that website into the chat as well, but I'm assuming you have seen this website if you know about this event. So public diplomacy funding opportunities are really standalone, meaning that if you've applied to USAID, you've collaborated with another U.S. government or private sector institution, that doesn't have any bearing on public diplomacy funding opportunities. It may give you a little benefit in that you will have registered and sort of register with sam.gov and DUNS, and you will understand some of our paperwork. But these are really standalone, distinct opportunities that allow us to, as I mentioned before, connect audiences, connect people in the US and in South Africa. Did I skip on there? Oops, sorry. Do's and don'ts. The public affairs section, again, I want to say this really clearly. We are not a development agency and we don't do development. So things that yield only development goals are not going to be things that we're able to fund. Eligible applicants must be nonprofit organizations. I will say that over and over and over, and we will still get emails. May I apply? I'm a for-profit, I'm a business. An individual can apply, and often individuals don't want to apply because there is sometimes a tax burden that's between you and the South African Revenue Service. But individuals can apply and collaborate with a for-profit. However, nothing that we are funding can be used to raise any revenue for the applicant or the successful applicant organization. Nonprofit institutions, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions really are our preference because they're able to manage the funding, the requirements that we have, and lower risk overall. And again, All awards must have a component of American culture, history, or society. Very, very important. These are essential parts of how we make decisions about the applications we will receive. To that, we have some key themes here. These are embedded also in the Notice of Funding Opportunity with expanded descriptions and definitions, as well as what we cannot do. Please take note of this and what's in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which is pretty close to the same in its wording. We cannot do these things. There is no circumstance that we're going to break the law and do them anyway. We have to be really careful. We have a lot of rules and a lot of risk exposure as officials of the U.S. government that we need to manage as well, and we cannot, go outside the law. So SAMs and DUNS registration, we know it's very hard. I mentioned this a moment ago. I really want to convey to you, we understand, but we cannot do it for you. People email us all the time. Can you please do this? Can you help us? Can you tell us? Can you give us advice? We cannot give you advice because we cannot give legal advice or financial advice to an applicant or a successful candidate for funding. You have to have your SAMs and DUNS registration in order to receive the funds from the U.S. government. And in part of the process will be of the application process will be demonstrating that you do have that. In some cases, we have made exceptions for organizations that are most of the way there, but we will hold the funding. If you're selected, we will hold the funding. We will not formally sign the award until you have this. Again, this is the law. We value rule of law and we value following our policies. So we really do stick to this. There's no way around it. I want to also emphasize here that there is no cost. There are many ways that you can be scammed or charged or fall under some misunderstanding that there is a fee or you have to provide credit card details. You do not. And perhaps my colleagues can put in the chat box a little bit more or the links which are contained in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. I cannot tell you how important it is to read that funding opportunity in its entirety. I understand that it's complicated, dense language. I don't particularly enjoy reading it myself and I write them, but I really want you to read them. All that information is there so that you will understand exactly what you're getting into when you collaborate with the U.S. government. And there is one note here. Pay attention to the details. All information must match exactly. If you have previously registered in the DUNS system and the SAM.gov system, your new registry, your renewal, it's valid for a period of 4 or 5 years, I think. Your new registry must match exactly what you put in the past. The two systems have to reflect exactly. So if you say you live at 123 15th Street, and in the next one you put, I live at 123 15th Street, the system won't know what to do with it. So you have to make sure that everything is exactly the same. Precision is very important in these processes. Let's see. I can get to the next slide. Okay, that's it for questions. I'm going to stop my screen share briefly and stop share. And we'll take some questions. I'm going to look in the chat and see if there are any questions. If anybody has a question and would like to speak, feel free to raise your hand. I generally will see that. Let me just look in the university exchange collaboration with South African student with U.S. institution. Does the U.S. institution apply or the student? That's not up to me. That is up to you. Whatever you think makes the most sense in terms of who should apply. In general, this funding is not targeted to supporting individual travel or exchanges for individuals. We have a robust exchange program that facilitates many exchanges. And so we don't double up on that because this is not that kind of funding. It's a little bit different. Some information in the chat. Thank you to my colleagues for dropping that in there about DUNS and CAGE and SAM.gov registration. So be careful with that because we're really looking for the themes that are in that Notice of Funding Opportunity. I cannot tell you who should apply in terms of if it should be a student or a U.S. university. That's not my decision. but it just needs to be sensible and logical in accordance with what's in the notice of funding opportunity. Let me just scroll through. Yes, the links are now in the chat, and we will post the slideshow. Are there any questions before we move on? And I will invite my colleague Maureen to speak now about the notice of funding opportunity. Maureen, I'm going to unmute you and I'll share my screen and we'll walk through the notice of funding opportunity, okay?
Thanks so much, Kira. Can everyone hear me? I think that's a yes. And Kira, are you going to open the NOFO?
I'm trying, just give me one second.
Pull that up.
Sorry.
Yep.
Maybe you want to, maybe you want to briefly talk a little bit about what a NOFO is and the distinction between the two that are posted now.
Certainly. So a notice of funding opportunity is a formal process by which the US government solicits proposals or statements of interest in funding opportunities with the US government. All of our opportunities are posted on grants.gov. Right now, we have 2 funding opportunities that are available across South Africa. The first is soliciting statements of interest. So if you go to the link that our colleague Mark provided earlier in the chat box for award announcements on the US Embassy page, you can see that there are 2 opportunities there. The first is soliciting statements of interest, which is a much shorter process, and then leads to a secondary process through which proposals are specifically solicited. The proposal process that we are discussing today is a solicitation of full-length proposals on May 30th now in 6 separate categories. So this is the second funding opportunity available that again is soliciting full-length proposals due on the 30th of May. So now, Kira, I can see the funding opportunity has been posted. And so you can see from the title that we are really working in 6 specific areas with this proposal. And you have the opportunity to apply for for funding in one of these 6 areas. No one entity may apply to more than one. So these are going to be in advancing women in business, mitigating climate change, providing media literacy, and now I've forgotten which are the other 3 that I haven't mentioned yet. Sorry, Kira, you're scrolling. So I will come back to those. Promoting social justice and celebrating Black History Month is one of the others. And I will try to scroll back down. Countering gender-based violence and expanding the University Partnership Initiative. Thanks, Kira. If we can go back to the top, let's go back there. So this solicitation, again, has a deadline of May 30th. That's very important. That is a firm deadline, and there is no leniency for late submissions. All submissions must go to the Pretoria grants@state.gov email address listed in the proposal and in the chat box earlier. This proposal is for funding for between $50,000 and $100,000 for any given proposal, but you will see that in some categories we are asking organizations to consider the possibility of scaling up, but the actual original proposal must be in that $50,000 to $100,000 range. The group that in this case is soliciting the proposals is the public diplomacy section of the US Embassy in South Africa, where Kira and I and some of the other colleagues present on this call are working. And this is why we are requiring that all program proposals have strong ties and build relationships between the United States and South Africa. And a really critical element of this is that we see a strong American element, connections with the United States. There has to be something that really is strengthening the bonds between our two countries, and where we're really looking to promote increased understanding between Americans and South Africans. That's what we're really going for. And because this funding is coming from the public diplomacy section of a US embassy, this is why this has such strong emphasis for us. Also want to emphasize that our priority regions emphasize activities across South Africa, and we're really encouraging proposals that are going to reach multiple areas or go beyond the urban centers where we have consulates and an embassy in South Africa as the US mission here. So that means going beyond Pretoria, Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. Not that we don't want activities in those areas, we do, but we are going to warmly welcome proposals that can reach beyond those areas where we usually have a lot of existing activity. Also of note is with regard to COVID-19, we recognize the restrictions on movement and gatherings, restrictions that exist here in South Africa, and of course for international travel as well. And as such, we request that all proposals, if they do include any plans for international travel, that those plans do not occur until January of 2022 at the absolute earliest. All program proposals need to have flexibility to evolve should there be changing restrictions related to COVID-19 in the months and years to come. Unfortunately, we think that is something we simply need to prepare for, and we need to build that flexibility into all planning for proposals that would be starting this year. Turning back to the American content, really want to emphasize the importance of this element. It is really essential to the evaluation of project proposals. And we really want to see that this is meaningful, that there is engagement either between American and South African experts, that there is some kind of collaboration or other specific components that make it a good investment of public diplomacy resources to expand on those relationships and build those areas. So that's really, if I had to pick one most essential thing to consider when building your proposal, that would be it. So if we can scroll down just a little bit, let's discuss the 6 specific categories. The first is advancing women in the workforce to achieve economic growth. This is a more open-ended category where we are seeking proposals that will address the gender gap in senior leadership positions in South African businesses. This is a challenge that is shared in the United States and in South Africa. And we are looking for proposals that could help move the needle in this target area with a specific audience of established professionals with the ability to influence change in South Africa in the coming years, I would say. We recognize that this is a long-term goal, but one that we think is important, and we are eager to see what suggestions and partnerships may be available. If you can scroll down a little further, and again, this is going to be really important to have American content in all of these. The next is mitigating climate change, and this is again looking to leverage mutual areas of interest between the United States and South Africa with regard to climate change. And we do want proposals that are working in a specific sector of climate change. That's a very large category by itself, so we are looking for something more targeted from any given proposal. Some of the ideas put forward in our NOFO are youth engagement, entrepreneurship, or education. And we really want to emphasize that we are looking for short-term impact that may be paving the way for long-term impact, and that we really want to see proposals that are targeting specific audiences. The next category is in improving media literacy and journalism training. In this area, we are looking for proposals that are going to strengthen fact-checking skills and responsible media consumption. We have a target audience identified as high school or university educators and students, and there are 3 specific elements that must be included in all proposals in this category. We also would welcome programs that have additional connections with schools or other partners that may allow ongoing skill building that go beyond the life of the program, things that will contribute to legacy. The next category is celebrating Black History Month and promoting social justice. This is a specific category to commemorate Black History Month in February of 2022. We are specifically looking for proposals that will reflect upon the shared histories of the United States and South Africa, painful histories, and with challenges that are ongoing. In this category, we are looking for project activities that would allow at least one event that would have participation from senior leadership of the US mission. And we're particularly interested in raising awareness of African American literature, culture, and history with South African audiences, as well as conducting education outreach that really makes connections between African American struggle for equality in the United States and South Africa's liberation struggle. There are many tools that you could consider to achieve this, and we are particularly interested in proposals that are going to reach outlying areas, again, not just urban centers, but also rural communities, and perhaps going beyond universities in the urban centers and going to TVETs and rural universities as well. The next category is countering gender-based violence. Again, a very broad category, but this is a program area where we would like to include youth and particularly focus on prevention efforts to ensure that young men are actively involved in the dialogue as well as the solution. And we are looking broadly for a program that would really embrace discussions with traditional cultural and religious leaders, perhaps those who have not previously been fully included, and looking at mentorship programs addressing toxic masculinity and providing healthy role models. Some of the target audiences may include policy influencers, as well as youth and university students and faculty and journalists. So this is a very broad category as well, and we are again looking for specific program proposals that will identify areas within this broad category to narrowly focus on goals that can be achieved with the funding available and in the permitted time. The final category is on expanding the University Partnership Initiative. Last year, Mission South Africa solicited proposals specifically for the University Partnership Initiative. We are seeking similar proposals this year, but at a slightly different funding level, that in line with the other categories listed. And we are focusing on faculty and student exchanges, facilitating joint research, building administrative capacity, and creating public-private partnerships. There had been some questions earlier in the chat box, and we fully recognize that this is one of the key areas where public-private partnership can enhance existing proposals and also add to funding and options to continue project work beyond the life of a US award. Those elements are not required, but we understand that they may contribute to a successful proposal. This is also an area where collaboration with existing US mission programs or alumni of USG funded exchanges is encouraged. We're particularly interested in programs that are allowing South Africans to complete their studies in their home country and address the shortage of qualified academic staff here in South Africa. I think this, if you can scroll down a bit further, Kira. Briefly, there is a list of programs that are not eligible for funding. This is important, and I don't want to dwell too much on them here, but I do think that is important to review and ensure that your project proposal does not include any of these elements that are not permitted, such as construction or fundraising or travel to the United States for personal purposes, etc. Scrolling down just a little bit to section B, the period of performance, which means the period of time that the project has to be completed, should be from 12 to 24 months, as the anticipated start date is by September 30th of this year. That means that all projects should be completed by September 30th of 2023. We do anticipate that there will be multiple awards. The exact number depends on funding available, but our estimates are here in the NOFO provided. Kira already spoke a little bit about funding instrument type, but in general, that can be worked out in negotiations after a project is selected for funding. The other item to note is that if you wish to include an option to renew, this can be included in your proposal as well. And some of the project categories specifically encourage the option to expand or extend. So you are welcome to include that option in your original project proposal. This can also be added at the negotiation stage if your proposal is selected for funding. And I think I will pause there as the eligibility information follows. We can focus just now that this, for the eligible applicants, would be not-for-profit organizations, public and private nonprofit educational institutions, individuals, and government institutions. I do note that we do have individuals available as an option, but the majority of our partners are organizations. And then yes, as Kira is highlighting, cost sharing is not required. And then there is a requirement to comply with the DUNS, NCAGE, and SAM registration. That information was copied into the chat box, and there are guidance that follows in the NOFO itself. It is important to underscore here for everyone that all of these registrations are free of charge, and there is no reason at any time to pay an outside entity to register. Unfortunately, we are aware of a number of fraudulent actors who offer these services. They are not required, and you can receive assistance in the website and telephone numbers listed should you have any trouble with the registration process. Generally speaking, the only important element for this is allowing enough time to complete the registration. Please do not wait until the last minute. You can also initiate the registration process and finalize it while your proposal is being reviewed. It is very important that your proposal clearly address your goals and objectives. This is spelled out in the proposal specifics. Everything must be in English language, and all budgets must be in US dollars. So yes, you must convert all of your RAND costs to dollars in your project proposal. There are some additional guidances on typography and formatting. Please do adhere to those carefully. We must receive, again, all of your documentation via email, and no other submitted material will be reviewed. The required forms are listed below, and there are links to those forms via grants.gov. Our proposal for this application must be no more than 7 pages. That will force everyone to be concise in their project proposals. And we are asking that everyone include the following elements within those 7 pages. That includes the proposal summary, which must outline the project itself and the anticipated impact, a very brief description that will offer an introduction to the organization or the individual who is applying, including any information on previous grants from the US government. You need a problem statement that should be 1 paragraph long that will describe the problem that will be addressed and why the proposed project is necessary. Then the program goals, if you can scroll down a bit further, need to describe what the project is intended to do, and the objectives are the short-term and intermediate accomplishments on the way to the long-term goals. And this is important. They should be achievable and measurable. We will come back to that in a minute with the monitoring and evaluation. The program activities should be described, including how they will work toward the established objectives, including location and target audiences and participants. We don't need individual names, of course, but a description of the category of participant and approximate numbers would be appropriate. This is the area where you would also include how American content will be incorporated into the program. We also need the methods and design of the program, essentially how the project is going to work to achieve the stated goal. You may include a logic model if that is appropriate, but we are comfortable with a brief description as well if that suits the purpose. The proposed schedule and timeline is essential, and again, that must fall in that 12 to 24 month range and should include approximate dates, times, and locations for planned activities, meaning that if you have a major milestone event, the approximate month and year along with location, as much detail as possible. But again, we understand that this would be further finalized later on, but that any known elements would be included. Key personnel should include those who have senior roles in the project, and we require their names, titles, and qualifications. But again, this should be very brief to fall within the allowed space. A key question is what proportion of their time will be used in support of this project, which comes into play in the budget. Also, we need the program partners. If there are any key partner organizations or anticipated sub-awardees, those to whom you would grant some of the funds directly if you were to win the award. And it must be clear whether these partnerships are already finalized and currently exist, or if they are aspirational and intended for the future. Coming back as promised to monitoring and evaluation. This is essential throughout the time of the grant, and we need to understand how the activities will be monitored to ensure that they're happening, and also how they're evaluated to make sure they are meeting the goals of the grant. What is the plan to measure whether or not the project is working, essentially. a media outreach plan, including how promotional materials would include US branding and any expected cooperation with the US Embassy Press Office. So if you had anticipated major events where you would solicit US Embassy official participation, or where you would anticipate having a joint press release or other such activities, could be noted there. Additionally, if you are considering an option to extend, this would be where you would note your plan for continuing the program beyond the grant period should additional resources be available. And then I'm going to pause. I see. All right, we'll come back to the chat questions in a moment. Turning to the budget, there is a template budget available on the grants.gov website. Although your budget submission is ultimately up to you, we encourage using the available budget template. There are also attachments that should be included, including resumes of the key personnel, letters of support from the established program partners, if those are indeed established relationships and not aspirational ones. If your organization already has an approved NICRA, and if you have any required official permission letters for any program activities. And if you can scroll further, we then get into the details for DUNS, NCAGE, and SAM, which again were placed earlier in the chat box. These do offer the points of contact for assistance if you should have any trouble. Unfortunately, this is not something the US Embassy can assist with directly, but there are resources available for all of these systems. And if you can keep scrolling, again, the deadline will be 11:59 p.m. South Africa time on Monday, May 30th. So those who need to work through the weekend to finalize your applications can do so. And they must be submitted again via email only to pretoriagrants@state.gov. When applications are reviewed, these are the categories that the grants committee will review: the quality and feasibility of the program, the budget, program planning and the anticipated ability to achieve objectives, organizational capacity and record on previous grants, if any, and the monitoring and evaluation plan. These are the essential elements, and you'll see that we've underscored once more in the description of the quality of the program idea, American content. So I really want to underline how important that is to us. Of course, a budget is important, and keeping things reasonable with sufficient detail is important. But I think it's also key to underscore the monitoring and evaluation element, and how an organization plans to measure output and outcomes, and how they would define those outputs and outcomes, as well as how they would be reported back over the life of the award. And Kira, if you can scroll a little further. And if there is any anticipated sustainability, that's also very important for consideration as well. The selection process that follows the submission on May 30th is that a review committee will be convened to evaluate all eligible applications. There may be separate review committees for each of the categories. Oops, I see this is a typo. There are 6 categories. That will depend on the number of applications received in each category. And notification will occur in due time, keeping in mind that we expect all awards to be finalized no later than September 30th. And then this is additional information on our anticipated award dates. So our best guess is that recipients will be notified by August 2nd and awards will be finalized by September 30th. We will do our best to hold to that, but it always depends on when funding becomes available. And again, the presence of this NOFO and even the convening of the awards committee does not merit a commitment of funding on behalf of the US government. We only finalize our commitment to funding when an award is signed and approved by all parties. The payments are also made by EFT, and this is very important for those in South Africa with South African bank accounts. The exchange rate on the date of a given transaction will be used. This means that a fluctuating rate of exchange between the US dollar and the South African rand can affect funding over the course of the award, or more specifically, if we are awarding you funding in dollars, may affect how many rand you get for those dollars. We understand that. And for those who are, of course, successful, you can work through any significant changes in currency with the grant officer. But for the purposes of your proposals, we generally recommend looking at average rates of exchange over a period of time to make your best guess. But we recognize when there are fluctuating exchange rates that can affect budgets over time. These are important references should you have questions about any of the details above. And then the reporting requirements, generally, this will be specified within any finalized award, but we generally recommend quarterly reports that then must be completed within 30 days of the end of each reporting period. So if, for example, you were reporting on the first quarter of the calendar year from January 1 to March 31, you would need to complete that report by April 30th and submit that to the US mission. And it would be the same for every quarter of the award, both a financial report and an update on the program itself. But that is finalized in the project negotiation process. And again, please remember that while all of the award documents are available on grants.gov, all proposals must be submitted to the grants administrator at Pretoria Grants at state.gov. There are some important notes on budget justifications. Again, we mentioned at the top that it's important to account for what percentage of time any given personnel team members contributing to the project. If someone is contributing 20% of their time for the project, then it would make sense that 20% of their salary and benefits and any other compensation would be covered, but we would not cover 100% of that if they are only putting 20% of their time into the project. Likewise, reasonable costs are expected. We do like to note that equipment has far more complex requirements if it is more than $5,000 a unit. And it will require some additional documentation for anything that is that costly. Most supplies are those that will cost less than $5,000 per unit. And we do anticipate that most costs would fall in that category. If you are going to have a formal relationship with another partner in contract services, that should be included in the budget and should be described clearly, especially if it's a significant portion of the budget. The exact services expected for the payment received should be clear within the budget. Additionally, costs that cannot fit anywhere else can fall under other direct costs, but in general, we advise as much as possible to be in the specified categories. That makes things easier if an award is approved because there are separate rules that apply to how funds can be moved within a budget after an award is provided and a budget is approved. Finally, indirect costs are generally those referred to the overhead costs, operational costs. If your organization already has a NICRA, a negotiated rate with the US government, then that is what applies. But otherwise, you can include your own rate or a flat rate of 10% is generally the baseline for those who do not have a NICRA. I think that is the end. Oh, just one note, you can never use US government funds for alcoholic beverages. So even if you are hosting events and providing catering, alcohol cannot be covered. So please do not include that in the proposal. We can go back to specific questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. This is Kira again, everybody. We do have some specific questions in the chat box. And again, we're not going to be able to provide specific guidance on your own distinct proposal. But in general, I see one question, the most recent one is, can the budget allocate a partial bursary for a student who's working on this project? All costs related to the project have to be logical and rational and make sense to enhance the project and enhance the outputs and the outcomes of the project. So a student working, whoever's working on the project needs to be qualified to do so. And that's why we ask for the CVs of the people involved in that project. However, in some cases, yeah, you'll have an intern. You could have an intern, or you could have somebody receiving a small stipend to do field work or to do some collaboration. So it just depends. You need to be honest and transparent about all of the costs. And we do this a lot. I recognize that a lot of people, this will be the first or one of the first times that you're thinking of collaborating or applying to collaborate with us. We do this all the time, so we can see what we have a pretty good eye for what makes sense and those extra things that sometimes applicants tuck in that aren't necessarily going to enhance the project. The good news is that often in the feedback that we give to a selectee or a potential selectee, we'll ask specific questions about what this is, or please explain XYZ, please explain line item 14 and tell us why this person needs to be receiving this. If you're talking about somebody just receiving a tuition support or tuition assistance, that is very unlikely to meet favorable consideration. I would not say that that's the direction that we want to be going. This is not meant to be an exchange or a scholarship program. I talked about exchanges. I did not mention scholarships. This is definitely not a scholarship program. And take a careful look at the list of what we do not do, what we cannot do, to get a better idea of that. I think that answers that question. Let's see, the project is in South Africa, but the charity is registered elsewhere. That's fine. We're looking for South African audiences. So we like to start with our audience and work backwards from there. The audience and the theme, where do they coincide and what makes sense? So yeah, no, that's not a big concern to us. However, we do need, evidence that it's still not a for-profit entity. And in whatever country that is, we probably have an embassy, and we're probably going to seek references from our colleagues in the embassy in another country, should we wish to go forward. But we're really concerned about where the audience is. That's the whole intention, is reaching South African audiences. The SF-424 form will be submitted as a PDF document, and another Word document is 7 pages. Yeah, you can submit the SF-424 as a PDF, and the other document needs to be the more thorough, detailed proposal. You can further break down your costs. The SF-424 looks at it in macro categories, you could include a small, table in your proposal that would further break down those costs, because I think a lot of us like to see, I know that I do, and I think it's helpful for applicants, but we can never require it. We can only require the SF 424. You want to be, transparent, or you want to have a good plan for reporting, that's fine. And we're happy to weigh in, and once we're going forward with the negotiation, we're very happy to weigh in and give specific guidance at that point. Once we've decided to go ahead with funding, there is a lot of conversation around the different line items and the different items that are included in the budget. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but yeah, I would say submit the SF 424 and the PDF as a PDF is fine, and then the other document, the more detailed proposal, to us in the format specified in the notice of funding opportunity. Okay, if there are not other questions, if there are other questions, either raise your hand now or drop them in the chat. Can you apply for both the short and large, the smaller and the larger grant? No, you can apply for both. That's fine. That's not a big deal. I think allowing them to be linked to each other, interesting idea. I don't think we had thought of that. I'm not going to tell you yes or no on that, because that's really up to the design of the project and what it aims to achieve. But I will tell you that these are distinct in their two separate notice of funding opportunities for a reason. One, the money will be, the amounts are different, and two, the money will be monitored and evaluated, and the program outputs will be evaluated in a little bit different ways. When you get into the larger numbers, we have a lot more, obviously a lot more equity in it. So I think that's an interesting concept. I don't think it's something we had considered. I don't think it would disqualify an application, but it's not what we had necessarily what we had in mind. So I think consistency with both the process and the substance of it is the most important thing. And if there's a way that an organization can make them link, interesting. Let's see what that is. Can the 7 pages be included under line 15 in the SF 424? I am sorry, I do not understand that that question, Mark. Maybe if you can try to weigh in the chat box with that. I'm not sure I understand that question. Can the 7 pages be included under line 15 item of the SF 424? No, well, I can tell you the 7 pages is a different document. It's the proposal, and the SF 424 is the macro budget, the big budget. So those are totally different. Let me take a quick look. There's a question here. We work with Facebook and Google in South Africa and use some of their content for digital literacy campaigns. Is that a good enough American link? Yes, it is. And no, it's not. In the proposal, the main thing about American content is tell me why that matters to me. Tell me why that content serves the goals that we've outlined. Make it easy for your decision makers to see why that content adds value. It's fine to have content. We see lots of proposals that have a series of things strung together that look like substantive content, but we're also quite good at identifying when that content is just kind of there to check the box. So please don't do that. Yes, but tell us more. Why in the proposal, simply working with Facebook and Google, which are American companies and of course, world-renowned, world-known companies, that's great. And I think that any company like that attracts a lot of interest, not specifically these two necessarily or exclusively, but go one step further and tell me why I should care about that. Tell your decision makers why that's important. I'm sorry, it seems we overlooked a question. We'll get back to that one. Hold on a second. Can you apply for a grant for different multiple organizations belonging to one NGO, NPO? I don't quite understand what the business structure of that would look like. You can apply for anything that you think makes sense according to these rules. Look, there's no harm, no foul for submitting something that doesn't get funded. And if it gets to be too complicated, that's either something that we'll say, we don't understand what this is, or this doesn't make sense. But if we like what it's doing, or it makes sense, that might be something we would consider talking about. Okay, it looks like my colleague Anand answered Jessica's proposal. One primary applicant. Yeah, that's the best way to say that. One primary applicant. Okay, we're at the 1 hour mark. As I said, we're going to be posting a recording of this conversation, and any future Q&As that come in will be answered in aggregate without identifying the questioner in the Q&As. However, we are definitely not providing specific guidance on any one proposal. We take seriously the fairness and transparency mandate, and as U.S. government practitioners and stewards of U.S. taxpayer funds, we're very committed to that transparency in all that we do. And we thank you for your patience, because we know that that can be very frustrating sometimes when you just have a question, but we really cannot help one entity more than we can help the others. And there are many of you here today, I'm very happy to say, and this would be a full-time job, and we just cannot do it. Today's recording will be posted on the same webpage where you see the notice of funding opportunity. That link has been shared several times in this chat. But I'll tell you, if you just go to Google or whatever search engine you choose, and there's the link again, thank you. And if you go to whichever search engine you use and type in U.S. Embassy South Africa and look under public diplomacy funding opportunities, you will find both of the notice of funding opportunities there. Today's conversation has been focused on the large scale funding amount. There are also smaller scale ones available. And remember that you don't have to apply for the max. If you're adding things in to get to that maximum, we're going to know, we're going to see it, and it doesn't really help the award or the application. So be serious, tell us what you need, why it matters to us, and we wish you the best, and thank you very much for your interest, and hope to see a lot of proposals. Thank you all very much. Have a great day, everybody. I just have to turn on my video so I can do the customary Zoom wave at the end of our meetings that we're doing now. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and we appreciate your interest.